T-minus 2 hours and 7 minutes and counting. We are currently tracking work done by the red crew, currently out at the launch pad, a specially trained crew, torquing down some bolts on a hydrogen replenish valve. The safety team has eyes on it. They're currently doing that work. I want to make a programming note for you. Currently, if you're watching NASA TV's main channel, we are now going to begin the special launch broadcast that we have planned. Meanwhile, over on the NASA television media channel, we will continue with operational commentary. Again, we're getting ready to start a launch broadcast, a special launch broadcast on NASA TV main channel, but we will maintain operational commentary on NASA TV's media channel. Please stand by for that. This is Artemis Launch Control. Meanwhile, over on the but we will maintain operational commentary on NASA TV's media channel.
Where the energy here is palpable as we attempt to make history today. I'm Megan Cruz, and this is NASA astronaut Kayla Bear. Erin. Kayla, great to have you here again.
So awesome to be here tonight.
Well, some of you may know this, but Kayla served as a mission specialist for NASA's SpaceX Crew 3 mission. It launched to the International Space Station in November of last year, and she lived and worked there for about 6 months. Today, I am thrilled to have her here with me to talk about this rocket behind us illuminating beautifully the night sky here in Florida.
Yeah, it's so awesome to be here tonight. When I first walked up and saw the view from the desk here, I was just blown away by how close it is and what an awesome view it's going to be when we get to launch time.
Yeah, it's a magnificent view, and I know you're especially excited about this because if we launch today, this will be the first launch that you actually see from the ground.
Exactly. I've never been able to come see a launch in person. Except for my own, of course, but that's a little bit different perspective.
Very different, yeah.
But to be here for the world's most powerful rocket and the first test flight of Orion and SLS is just amazing.
Yeah. So our 2-hour launch window opens at 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time. So Kayla, tell everyone, why are we returning to the moon?
We are returning to the moon to learn more about it. The moon is a perfect place to learn more about our solar system, how the moon formed, but also how the Earth and the rest of our solar system formed. And we know so little about it. There's a lot to learn by returning there and doing some awesome geology work, but it's also the perfect proving ground for our continuation, exploring further into our solar system and eventually going to Mars.
Right.
We need to test all the operations concepts, all the equipment, habitats, rovers, suits, all of these things. And so it's the perfect place to test all of those things out and learn the things we need to do something that's almost hard to wrap your head around, going all the way to another planet.
Absolutely. Really ambitious goals, and it all starts here with Artemis 1. So Artemis 1 is the first flight test of NASA's brand new Space Launch System, or SLS rocket. It's the world's most powerful rocket and will send an uncrewed Orion spacecraft farther around the moon than any of the Apollo missions before it. Artemis 2 will be the first crewed mission around the moon, and then Artemis 3 will use a brand new human landing system to bring astronauts to the surface of the moon. Future Artemis missions will dock to Gateway, NASA's lunar orbiting space station, before descending to the moon. So Kayla, what must we demonstrate with Artemis 1 before we put astronauts on board for those future crewed missions?
This is our first integrated test flight of the rocket, the Space Launch System rocket, and Orion, the capsule that crew will fly in on Artemis 2. And so it's really important for us to put all of those systems together and actually send them to do a mission, test all those systems in real time in concert together. We do a lot of testing before we get to this moment, before we get to launch day, but it's not integrated, and we're not actually putting the systems under all of the real world stresses they're going to see. So we want to see the rocket perform, we want to see Orion make it around the moon, go super deep into space, and then come home and successfully re-enter. So the heat shield actually has to withstand the fastest and hottest re-entry we've ever seen in human spaceflight. So that's a big thing we want to see. The heat shield perform successfully, and then of course recover the vehicle, test all of that. So it's a lot, but it's the important first step before we put crew on the vehicle.
Yeah, lots of eyes on this one for sure. So tanking of the rocket began at 4:30 this afternoon. NASA's Daryl Nail is inside with the launch team and has some information about an issue they're currently working.
Yeah, that's right, Megan. The launch director gave the go for tanking shortly after 3 p.m. this afternoon, but as of right now, there is a red crew, as they are named, a specially trained team of individuals out at the pad making an unplanned change to a replenish valve on the liquid hydrogen side. There are 2 technicians and a safety representative that are right now working inside the mobile launcher. It's in an open air area that has a replenish valve that goes to the liquid hydrogen side of the core stage. Now this happened roughly earlier this evening, probably about an hour ago, when a leak was detected at the core stage liquid hydrogen valve by the launch team here inside firing room 1 at the Launch Control Center. Unfortunately, the team here was unable to remedy the leak remotely, and so it became necessary to send a crew of individuals, called the Red Crew, out to the launch pad to make a hands-on fix, so to speak, to that valve. And what they're doing is they're torquing down bolts that are on the valve. They believe that by torquing these bolts down, they'll get a better seal on that replenish valve, and that should remedy the leak. The leak was detected by the hazardous operations team here inside the launch control when the percentage of hydrogen went above 1%. Now that's significant for this particular area because it is an open air location, the skid valve that runs the liquid hydrogen into the core stage. And we had reached replenish when this leak was detected. Over on the liquid hydrogen side, of course, there's two tanks on the core stage, liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. Both had been topped and gotten into replenish when this leak was detected. Currently, liquid oxygen is topped off and stable in replenish, but the liquid hydrogen is in stop flow at the moment, which will prevent them from proceeding forward with a launch until that leak is remedied. Again, this red crew is inside the area, inside the blast danger area, working inside the mobile launcher, torquing down those nuts that are associated with the replenish valve for the liquid hydrogen side of the core stage. Of course, we'll keep you updated on the operation. In the meantime, I'll send it back to Megan.
The team rolled the rocket back to the pad 2 weeks ago, and it stayed there through Hurricane Nicole, which made landfall last week as a Category 1 just south of Kennedy Space Center. Teams inspected everything after the storm and confirmed they were ready to try and launch today. Now, Daryl is one of a team of people helping to bring you today's uncrewed flight test. We have Jasmine Hopkins nearby, also inside with the launch team, who will interview some key players in our return to the moon. We also have Leah Cheshire inside Mission Control at Johnson Space Center. Dan Hewitt with a new tool we're excited to show you. Leo Martin at the Kennedy Space Center Visitor Complex. And finally, Brian Cizik with the U.S. Space Force monitoring weather. With 1 hour, 54 minutes until liftoff. How are we looking, Brian?
And you showed we certainly had some interesting weather here in East Central Florida over the last several months, but I'm happy to report we're not looking at any type of satellite imagery like the ones you just showed. Overall, weather is looking quite favorable as we head throughout the countdown and into the launch window. So here's what we're looking at right now, really just one area of concern. That's these upper level clouds so there's a cold front in the Gulf of Mexico right now. That's produced some showers in the Gulf, but those are not expected to get to us by the launch window, but the upper level winds are bringing in some moving in. Now they're high enough and thin enough where they're really not going to be a concern. For it to be a thick cloud layers rule violation, they'd have to be a lot thicker and a little bit lower in the atmosphere in order to hold a charge. So that's what we're looking for in these lightning launch commit criteria, not just natural lightning, but rocket triggered lightning potential. And some of these clouds can hold a charge. A rocket can actually induce a lightning strike in in an atmosphere that's not strong enough to produce a natural lightning strike. So that's really what we're watching. But right now, weather is go. These clouds, as I said, are high enough and thin enough where they're really not going to be much of a concern. But we are going to be watching it. My colleagues Melody Lovin, Mark Berger, and the rest of the launch weather team will be watching this very closely as we head closer to T0. So let's take a look at the graphic. The latest briefing, 90% go. Really, the only concern being the thick cloud layers rule and a very small the cumulus cloud rule. But overall, the weather is looking favorable. As I said, right now, weather is go. Those clouds are high enough and thin enough where we do not expect them to be a concern. So I'm happy to report a very favorable launch forecast as we head closer to T0. Back to you.
So you just love hearing 90%, you know? That's wonderful, especially here in Florida. You know what I mean? Weather can really be tricky here in Florida. So 90% is perfect. Now, Florida's Space Coast has been the primary launch site for NASA's crewed missions for the last 6 decades. First Apollo, then Shuttle, the Commercial Crew Program, which Kayla flew up as a part of, and soon Artemis. Let's go now to NASA's Jasmine Hopkins.
Thank you so much, Megan. We're here in the Launch Control Center amid all the excitement in Firing Room 2, and I'm so glad right now to be joined by our Kennedy Space Center Director, Janet Petro, and our Deputy Director as well, Kelvin Manning. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Hi, Jasmine.
We are so glad to have you. This team has overcome a lot to get to today. We are no stranger to storms on the Space Coast. We overcame Ian, and then Nicole. Janet, how did we embrace the challenge?
That's my line, Jasmine.
Yeah.
I got to say, I couldn't be more proud of the team out here. Everything we did to get to this point, and then to have those 2 storms thrown at us at the last minute. Nicole, all the evacuations. As you know, one time we remained at the pad, and the other time we had to roll back to the VAB. But I got to tell you, across the workforce, whether it was our program people, across the agency, our institutional support organizations, they all came together in a team, and so here we are tonight, looking forward to a great launch.
Right, we're a very strong team, and we have been at this for years, for decades. We started off during the Apollo program, but now we've evolved into what we are calling a multi-user spaceport. Kelvin, what does that mean?
So when we were getting ready to retire the space shuttle, a lot of people thought we were going out of business, literally shutting down. But our leadership team, we had a vision to create what we called a multi-user spaceport to become the world's premier government and commercial spaceport. And so that's happened over the last 10 or so years, probably a lot faster than we thought it would. But if you would say, you ask us, well, what's the future look like? I'll tell you, we're just getting started.
Right, the future is very bright for us, and this is a really big day for NASA. I mean, Artemis launched, but an even bigger year for Kennedy Space Center, the Diamond Anniversary, our 60th anniversary. Janet, how have we commemorated that big milestone?
Oh, we've had a whole bunch of celebrations all along. As you know, Kennedy became a center back in 1962, as you said. We've been celebrating all year long, and I can't think of a better way of culminating our Diamond Anniversary with a launch of the Artemis for the Artemis generation later this evening.
Right, that is so exciting. And what does it mean for both of you to be leading the center at one of our busiest cadences we've ever seen? We've had over 40 launches this year alone. What has that been like?
We're gonna get past 50 tonight, I think. But for me, I'm incredibly honored to be leading this team. It really is all about the team and the workforce. We have such a highly skilled, a highly dedicated, a highly motivated workforce. We have an incredible mission, and we all come together and embrace the challenge and make things happen.
Right.
Yeah, it is a privilege to work here, and it's not about us. Like Janet said, it's about the people.
It really is. It's about this great team. Janet, Kelvin, thank you both so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jasmine. Go Artemis.
Yes, go Artemis.
Go Artemis.
Absolutely. Megan, back to you.
Great to hear from them. So 1 hour and 48 minutes and counting till our 2-hour launch window opens. We heard Dale report out that there is a team at the pad working an issue. So why don't we go back to him now to see he has an update for us.
Yeah, Megan, now continuing to track the Red Crew's work at the launch pad. This is a specially trained team, 3 individuals, 2 technicians, 1 safety representative who are currently right now inside the mobile launcher at the base of the launch pad. They are doing work on a replenish valve, currently torquing down the bolts in order to remedy a leak in that replenish valve that was detected a little over an hour ago. Now, this is significant because currently with a leak, they have had to go into what's called stop flow on the liquid hydrogen tank of the core stage. Normally, under replenish, they continue to flow liquid hydrogen into the tank as it boils off in order to maintain a level of around 100%, but that has been in stop flow, and so at this moment we are slowly losing liquid hydrogen in the core stage hydrogen tank. The Red Crew went in and is currently working a little longer than expected on the issue. It was estimated that it would take 15 minutes to do the work, but as we're now finding out, the Red Crew is torquing down the valves and then backing out of the area and allowing the valves to test to see if they've got that leak fixed. So as they do this, it will understand, cycle this work, go in, cycle the valves, torque them down again if they continue to leak, and then back out and test the work. And this may continue until they have it fixed. The red going on to the launch pad isn't a totally uncommon occurrence, certainly new with the Artemis program, but work like this was done in previous space programs. The Red Crew is special trained for this work. They are accustomed to working around in hazardous operation, especially a fully tanked rocket. Again, we are tracking Red Crew's operation out of the pad. It's expected that this will eat into the launch window, which currently we have liftoff at 1:04 a.m. Eastern Time, but the window runs 2 hours to 3:04 a.m. Eastern Time. Again, monitoring the Red Crew's work. We'll have more updates for you a little later on. For now, back to you, Megan.
Thank you, Daryl. Some quick programming notes. For the first time ever, we are broadcasting a launch in 4K. You can watch it on NASA's YouTube channel or check your local provider to see if you have NASA's UHD channel. The audio is also available on the local amateur VHF and UA radio frequencies you see at the bottom of your screen. So if you're here along the Space Coast and interested in that, make note of those frequencies now. Or you can watch today's launch with live commentary in Spanish. That broadcast starts at midnight on NASA en Español's YouTube page, which we're showing you now at the bottom of your screen. Now, Kayla, why did NASA name Artemis for our return to the moon?
Well, in Greek mythology, Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo. So it's really a connection back to the Apollo era, the amazing things we did as part of the Apollo program. But we wanted to nod to the future. You know,
Sure.
it's a new set of missions, we're objectives. So it's a connection to the past with an eye towards what we might do as part of the Artemis generation.
Yeah, let's talk about what those future ambitions might be. I mean, landing the first woman and first person of color on the lunar surface. That is a worthwhile ambition.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think we've come a long way since Apollo in the space program, but one of the ways we've evolved is our astronaut corps more closely reflects now.
Sure.
So those crews will be more diverse. And we think those diverse perspectives, not only in our astronaut corps, but our larger team, only make us a stronger one.
Yeah. All right. Well, coming up, we are going to hear from some of the Apollo astronauts and learn more about what we will accomplish for humanity by going back to the moon. We'll meet some of the women shattering glass ceilings to bring Artemis to life, including NASA's first female launch director. We'll also show you the Space Launch System up close and what happens when the cube
Continuing to work as you look at the rocket on the pad. They were called out to the pad about a half, and they appeared to be making their way, at least have stepped back from the area of work. The way that the workflow has been going is they torque down the bolts, step back a little bit. The launch team then cycles the valves to check to see if the leak is still there, and then they come back in, and this has happened a couple of times, and start torquing the bolt again. The rocket was nearly fully tanked. The core stage was in replenish for both hydrogen and oxygen. The upper stage had nearly been finished when the leak was detected, and the countdown, though it is continuing, the rocket, the leak had to be addressed in order for the launch to proceed. The replenish puts the hydrogen back into the tank after it boils off, and so currently we're in a stop flow which no longer allows a replenishment of the hydrogen tank, and that would not allow us to have a launch without those tanks being in total replenish, and also in a vented configuration, which has also been put on hold. I'm sorry, not a vented configuration, but rather an engine bleed has been stopped. And so that would need to continue as well in order to get the engines conditioned for launch. That's the latest here from Firing Room 1 at the Launch Control Center. Megan, we'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Daryl. 1 hour, 41 minutes until, again, the planned start of the 2-hour launch window. Right now, let's head over to the Apollo Saturn V Center at Kennedy Space Center's Visitor Complex, where NASA's Dan Hewitt is just inside in front of a Saturn V rocket, which is the only vehicle to date to carry humans beyond low Earth orbit. He's going to show us what he has behind us there, the moon board. It's an interactive tool.
Yeah, thanks, Megan, and welcome everybody. We're in the Saturn V Center, fitting that the rocket that carried astronauts to the moon of Apollo is just over our shoulder as we meet the rocket that's going to do it with the next generation under Artemis. So SLS, the Space Launch System, is out on the pad right now on the mobile launcher. Before we jump in that, just to give you a perspective, so that valve that Daryl's talking about is in the base section of this launcher down here. That's different from the areas we were focused on in August and September in these 33-foot tall tail service mast umbilicals that are delivering the hydrogen and oxygen to the core stage of SLS. So let's jump right in. A couple of key components to SLS. We're going to start here on the sides with the solid rocket boosters. If they look familiar, they're derived from those that flew the space shuttle. In fact, some of the segments of these boosters today were flown on previous space shuttle missions. We call them solids because of the type of propellant inside. If you were able to look in, you would see a mix of ammonium perchlorate, aluminum powder, and a binding agent called polybutadiene acrylonitrile. That's your expert vocabulary word for the day. Now, as these are firing, they're providing more than 90% of the steering and 75% of the thrust as SLS makes its way uphill. And those are attached to the core stage, 212 feet tall, 5 major sections. We're going to start at the fun part down here on the bottom. 4 RS-25 engines, again, derived from those that flew the space shuttle. In addition, we have this core engine section here where we have all of their necessary plumbing, also the connection points where we're feeding the propellants into the core stage itself. And as these are firing, each one providing up to 500,000 pounds of thrust during operation, consuming 1,500 gallons of propellant every second as they go uphill. Now, these are liquid rocket engines, which means you need a fuel, about 500,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen, and an oxidizer, about 200,000 of liquid oxygen up here. That hydrogen gets fed through feed lines down at the bottom of the tank here. The oxygen coming from these 2 feed lines you see running down out of this, the intertank section. The intertank also has the upper attachment points for the solid rocket boosters. The bottom attaches down here at the engine block. Now, all the way up top, we have the forward skirt. It's where you have your core avionics, your brains for flying SLS, as well as connections to the mobile launcher and some antennas. And if we zoom in, why does it look all bumpy? We have a spray-on insulation on the core stage. These propellants are stored at cryogenic temperatures, hundreds of degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. And so we have to try and keep them as cold as possible. Now, underneath this upper skirt, we have the second stage, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, or ICPS. This is a modified upper stage from the Delta IV family of rockets from United Launch Alliance. Single RL-10B-2 engine, also propelled by liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen. This is used for our in-space propulsion maneuvers. Critically, that translunar injection, which is going to give us the energy to go beyond low Earth orbit and head out to the moon. Altogether, that's the Space Launch System. It's going to be making its first flight, hopefully today. It's going to be a heck of a show. Let's get back to the countdown. I'll send it over to you, Megan.
Thanks, Dan. 1 hour, 37 minutes and counting until our 2-hour launch window opens tonight. The Space Launch System rocket and Orion spacecraft together, standing just taller than the Statue of Liberty at Launch Pad 39B. It's the culmination of years of development and thousands of tests. Here's a look at its path to the pad.
The Space Launch System is really the backbone of the Artemis missions. It's the truck. It's the big carry vehicle.
It allows us to carry both crew as well as the equipment that we need to live and work on the moon.
60 years ago, NASA was in a race to get to the moon. This time is more than just a race. It's about establishing long-term presence.
Can you imagine rolling the Statue of Liberty out to put at the pad? That's what we're in.
It will lift up from Earth with more power than the Saturn V, which was the first vehicle to take us to the moon.
Artemis is our next giant leap.
The difference between the Apollo program and the Artemis program is really the focus on sustainability and using the moon as an outpost for further exploration.
This time, we're going back to learn how to live and work on the moon.
The Space Launch System really is the culmination of our knowledge for 60 years of building rockets.
We started by looking at over 1,700 different potential components that would go into the rocket, and by looking at the way we could reuse some of the most reliable equipment that was flown on the shuttle.
We took those and we put them together into a system that had enough energy to make sense to do the mission that we've been asked to do.
We're moving from low Earth orbit, like used in the International Space Station today, to moving beyond that, to taking the next step in exploration.
It's 322 feet tall. It's got 700,000 gallons of cryogenic propellant in the core stage alone. It can produce 8.8 million pounds of vacuum thrust. The Space Launch System is really a national rocket, a national asset too.
We have worked with contractors as well as with our NASA experts, our science and engineering department, our safety and mission assurance team.
To get the Space Launch System designed, developed, and produced, it has taken thousands of companies across the country.
It comes together by train, it comes together by plane, it comes together by barges.
So all of that culminates at the Kennedy Space Center for the launch of the first Artemis mission.
Everybody has worked together to ensure that we have a safe and reliable rocket.
At NASA, safety and testing is extremely important because ultimately
we have a generation who've never seen deep space exploration, and this will give them an opportunity to see that this is something that they can potentially do themselves.
it's going to be a paradigm shift for NASA. We're going to be back to looking at things that nobody's ever done before.
A lot to look forward to, and it all begins with launch. Afterwards, our friends at Johnson Space Center in Houston will control Orion once it's on its way to the moon. Let's get an update of operations there with NASA's Leah Cheshire.
Thanks, Megan, and welcome to Mission Control Houston, home of the red, white, and blue flight control rooms. But today we're in the white flight control room, which is just across the hall from where you usually see us in the International Space Station flight control room, like this morning when we conducted a spacewalk outside the space station. Now, this white flight control room has been used before during some space station missions, plus commanding Boeing's Starliner. Previously, this room was used for space shuttle missions and was renovated in 2014 to support our use with the Artemis program. Today's flight director is Judd Freeling, a flight director of 11 years who will lead the team through the ascent portion of the mission. After Freeling's shift today, flight director Rick LeBrode will lead the team through the rest of the mission all the way to entry and splashdown when Freeling will step in again. Other console members will be monitoring the various systems on Orion, like propulsion, solar arrays, and trajectory, and they arrived on console about 5 hours ago. And you might also be surprised to learn that there is indeed a Capcom or capsule communicator on console today as well. While there are no crew on board, Jay Marshke and other capsule communicators will be training throughout the mission in preparation for Artemis 2 and beyond. The Capcom is the single person in the room who speaks with crew, gathering info from mission control team and keeping streamlined communication with the astronauts in space. We're counting down to liftoff when team here will really jump into action and monitor the first Artemis flight, sending Orion further than any crew-rated spacecraft has gone before. But for now, Megan and Kayla will send it back to you at Kennedy Space Center to keep walking us through the events of the day.
Well, just really reminds us that no one is inside Orion. It's a day. Again, it's because Artemis 1 is a flight test to prove we return crew from lunar orbit on Artemis 2. And when we launched the first crewed mission, NASA has a very diverse and talented core to choose from, including Kayla here. We're looking at video now of some of your friends who got to go to the pad. That looks fun.
Yeah, it's always so exciting to see the rocket on the pad because you know you're getting close to launch. So we're all just really excited to see how this test goes today.
I wish I could have gone out there with them. You and me, what happened? We didn't get our invite. And I thought this was fun too. Some of your friends also got to fly over the pad in T-38s. Here's video of that now, incredible video. So these flyovers were common during shuttle, right?
Yeah, and we still try to do them whenever we can. We actually use the T-38 jet as a training platform. It's a chance for us to practice making real-world decisions in a high-risk environment, practice working as a team, and a good analog for spaceflight.
Okay.
But we also like to fly by the pad when we can. We have a rocket out there. It's a way of saluting and thanking the team for all the work it took to get to this moment.
That's great. Yeah, a worthwhile thing to do because yes, the team has worked so hard to get to this moment. And you spoke about training. Has training already started for Artemis 2 for you guys?
We've been developing the training, but the crews aren't assigned yet, so they're not in dedicated training flows yet. But our team at Johnson Space Center, where we train for human spaceflight, are working on all of the things that we're going to need to teach the crew and the best ways to go about that. Once we get that crew assigned, they'll be straight into training right up until launch day.
Awesome. Cool. All right. I can't wait to hear who gets assigned. And the absence of crew today doesn't mean Orion is empty. There are plenty of other interesting things flying on Artemis 1, including several technology demonstrations and science investigations we're going to show you throughout the broadcast. There are also some mementos like these seeds that we have right here. Right, Kayla?
Yeah, we have an example of the moon seeds that will be flying as part of this mission today, and the idea actually comes from an Apollo 14 astronaut, Stuart Roosa, who flew seeds with him to the moon, hundreds of them, and then brought them back to Earth, and they were planted all over the country and the world, and they're called moon trees. And so we're kind of carrying on with that idea on Orion for this launch.
Yeah, I love that. And the seeds that are flying on Artemis 1, it's going to come back and they're going to distribute it to a number of organizations through NASA's STEM program. So it's really a neat idea. And so these moon seeds are part of what's inside Artemis 1's official flight kit, along with more than 10,000 other mementos. Like this Apollo 8 commemorative medal you see here, a nod to 1968 when humans first orbited the moon, and a bolt from Apollo 11, 1969, when humans first landed on the moon. Those items are on loan to us from the National Air and Space Museum, and once back on Earth will be exhibited there, so you can check them out. There are also a variety of flags, pins, and patches like these Artemis 1 patches that will be distributed to people who contributed to this flight. Now, NASA spacecraft, both crewed and uncrewed, have carried mementos like these since the 1960s. Astronauts are also allowed their own personal flight kit, so I was wondering, what did you bring with you for your Crew 3 mission?
I actually brought a couple of examples to show you. The moon seeds inspired me to share that. I actually brought some vegetable seeds with me. So these are kind of fun. They're dragon themed, so I got dragon carrots and dragon beans.
Oh, that's
I went up on a SpaceX Crew Dragon vehicle.
Sure.
And then, of course, I think the most important, meaningful thing to all of us is usually pictures of our family and friends. So, have like picture of me and my family at my sister's wedding. Friends backpacking in Alberta. My mom together on a family vacation, and I also brought some flags, some American flags, and then United States Navy flags, since I'm a naval officer. So things like that. I think it's just so human to want to bring stuff with you, right? Souvenirs. Who doesn't love that?
Yeah.
I think for most of us, yeah, pictures of our family and friends, things that connect us back home are the most important.
Yeah, 6 months might not sound like a long time for people, but it is, right? When you say you're also so far, it's nice to have those tangible things that remind you of home.
Absolutely. Yeah, really important for us.
Cool. Thank you for bringing this. This was really fun to look at. All right, 1 hour, 27 minutes and counting until launch, and we have our first questions from social media, so let's take a look at the clip here. Kayla, you're going to notice a familiar, handsome face.
Hey there, I'm Chris Evans, and I play Buzz Lightyear in Pixar's Lightyear movie. I was wondering, when we fly future Artemis missions with astronauts, how many people can fly on board the Orion capsule at once?
My nephew's probably asleep, but he's a big Buzz Lightyear fan, so he's probably going to enjoy watching that question tomorrow. But we can get 4 astronauts in the Orion space capsule. It's a little bit bigger than the Apollo capsule, about 30% more habitable volume, and so instead of supporting 3 crew for about 2 weeks, Orion can support 4 crew for about 21 days.
Okay. Good first question. Let's take a second question now. Can a microbiologist be an astronaut?
Absolutely. And we already have microbiologists who are astronauts, like my trained classmate, Sina Cardman. So yeah, we hire people from all sorts of different backgrounds. All you have to do is have a STEM degree. Beyond that, you can come from any pathway. So some of us are military astronauts like me, either aviation or I'm a submariner, but we have a ton of people from different scientific and engineering communities, including microbiologists.
Yeah, I love that it's so diverse, because I think diversity really adds to what you guys can do.
Yeah, and those unique perspectives, I think, make us stronger as a team whenever we're tackling a new problem. Having people with different, not only academic backgrounds, but all of these scientists, a lot of them have different field experience. So like Zena worked in some really extreme environments in Antarctica, in caves, doing a lot of her research. So it's not that different than what we're hoping to do at the South Pole of the Moon. So these perspectives are really important for us to form the best team that we can.
Yeah, that's interesting. All right, I think we have time for one more question, so why don't we pull one up? What is the coolest part about Artemis to you?
I mean, I think I can't even quite get my head around how it might feel for the crew to orbit the moon on Artemis 2 and see that close, and then of course on Artemis 3 to actually land on the moon and conduct a moonwalk. It's just going to be incredible to have that view back of our home planet. And so just the thought of sending human beings back to the moon, it's just super exciting for all of us.
I honestly didn't know how you were going to answer that, because there is so many things to look forward to pinpoint, the thing that you're most excited about. I thought that was going to be a hard question, actually. All right, so great questions. Keep them coming using hashtag Artemis wherever you're watching this broadcast, and keep sending those moon-inspired content to, again, that's hashtag NASA Moon Snap, and we're going to show some of them later in the broadcast. Okay, 1 hour, 24 minutes and counting until hopefully liftoff of Artemis 1, and it's time for another update with NASA's Daryl Nail, who's with the launch team as they were monitoring a leak.
Yeah, that's right, Megan. We're inside the firing room number 1 here at the Launch Control Center at the Kennedy Space Center, and currently we have an update on that red crew which went out to the pad to torque down some bolts on a leaky hydrogen replenish valve for the core stage. And that update is that the red crew has departed the blast danger area. They have completed their work. They got to go at 10 p.m. this evening, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, to go out and conduct work that took roughly an hour from the time they were getting the go till the time they left the blast danger area. The technicians, 2 technicians and one safety representative, did work out the pad on the replenish valve, and now that they're on their way back, the team is now examining the work and whether or not that leak is still there. What we do know is, you may have heard me mention that this put the liquid hydrogen tank into stop flow, and as a result also stopped a required 90-minute engine bleed for the liquid hydrogen side. Teams have come to the conclusion that only a 45-minute bleed is required at this point. They can resume the bleed at the point that they left off, and it'll be enough to meet that requirement for launch. You're left where we're tracking the core stage We did this earlier this evening. Took about 4 hours and 20 minutes to fill the core stage. You can see the core stage liquid oxygen is at 100%. That's for the upper stage, and both are in stable. As you look to the right, though, you can see we're at 97% for liquid hydrogen. The reason for that is because when we went into stop flow, that means that the replenish was no longer refilling the tank, and that liquid hydrogen was boiling off and draining some of the capacity out of that particular tank. So we lost some liquid hydrogen. The plan is to resume, of course, the filling of liquid hydrogen, which goes into that into the liquid hydrogen tank on the core stage, and then vents out on that flare stack that you see to the right, where excess hydrogen is burned off. That's the latest here from Fire Room 1. Megan, we'll send it back to you.
Thank you. All right, let's go back inside our Apollo Saturn V Center now with NASA's Dan Hewitt. We last sent humans to the moon using a rocket behind you. Can you show us how we're going back now with Artemis?
Absolutely. Thanks, Megan. So Artemis 1 is going to take us from planet Earth around the moon and all the way back. I'm going to show you every step of the way. Like every great space mission, it starts with the launch. In this case, 4 RS-25 engines, 2 solid rocket boosters ignite, sending SLS and Orion into the sky. On the way uphill, we'll have a number of jettison events, things coming off the rocket. One of the most visible, these 2 large solid rocket boosters, a little over 2 minutes into flight, will break away. We'll also have the launch abort system come off once we're high enough, and then 3 fairings, which are protecting Orion's capsule and service module during the flight through the thicker parts of the atmosphere. Now, after the core stage is consumed its propellants, we'll hear MECO, main engine cut off. Those 4 engines will cut off. The core stage will drop away, handing over propulsion duties to this, the inner cryogenic propulsion stage. Its first job is a parachute maneuver. Parachute just means the lowest point of your orbit. This will give us a nice circular path for Orion around our planet. While it's there, we can really check the spacecraft out, make sure everything from electrical systems, guidance, navigation and control, communications are all functioning before we commit it to heading to the moon. And we do that with this, the trans-lunar injection. This will be about an 18-minute firing on today's timeline. And this is done to give us enough energy to get out of lower orbit and make our way to the moon. Shortly after that, the ICPS will separate. It'll do a disposal burn, sending it around the moon and into an orbit around the sun. But from there on out, propulsion duties get handed over to the European service module. It's going to make a couple of outbound trajectory correction burns on the way out, critically testing that orbital maneuvering system engine, that large one on the very bottom, that's going to be needed when we start making our maneuvers around the moon to get into what's known as distant retrograde orbit, or DRO. To do that, we're going to do the outbound powered flyby, dipping in about 70 or 80 miles off the lunar surface, really pushing with that large engine. That's going to slingshot us around. We're going to do a final orbit insertion maneuver, and then we will be in DRO, distant retrograde orbit. This dotted line right here. Distant for about 40,000 miles off the lunar surface, and retrograde because the moon orbits the Earth in a counterclockwise fashion. We're going to be going clockwise, opposite retrograde. It's a very stable orbit, doesn't require a lot of energy to maintain your space there. Really lets us put Orion through the paces, learn about using the spacecraft in deep space. But eventually it'll be time to come home. We'll fire up the engines once more, do a departure burn. This is what commits us from departing the moon and heading back home. We'll dip in close to the surface once more for the return-powered flyby and execute correction burns on the return transit as we target a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Before that happens, the spacecraft separates. The European service module's job is done. It drops away to burn up, revealing the heat shield. This is goal number 1 for this flight, is testing that heat shield at lunar return velocities, because when we hit the upper atmosphere, we're going to be moving more than 20,000 miles an hour, heating that up to more than 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So really need to make sure that that can withstand that heat of re-entry. After it makes it through, parachutes deploy, a Navy ship and other recovery assets are standing by to pick it up out of the water and bring it in to the first mission in the Artemis program. So that's all still going to unfold. It all starts with launch today, though, so let's get back to the countdown. Over to you, Megan.
Our return to the moon would not be possible without our partners across the country and the world. So joining us now is Frank Davina, head of ESA's European Astronaut Center. Good evening, Gail.
Good evening.
Well, so I want to ask you, talk to me about Airbus and how that company and ESA contributed to the Orion spacecraft.
Well, Airbus is of course the lead manufacturer and the integrator of the service module of our Orion capsule, and that will fly to the moon. So a very important part, of course, because without the service module, it's clear that we would not get to the moon or would not be able to return from it. So it's a very important part for ESA, but of course there are industries across Europe, not only Airbus, but across Europe that are contributing to the service module, in France, Belgium. Really, it's a really European project.
Yeah.
Frank, we've been close partners, NASA and the European Space Agency, for decades now, and partnering on things like the space station, scientific exploration, and of course commercial crew missions. Matthias Maurer, ESA astronaut extraordinaire, was on my crew, Crew 3. Can you tell us a little bit more about what makes these partnerships so important?
Well, it's important, these partnerships, because we want to do sustainable exploration of the moon. We want to explore space on a sustainable way, and I think partnerships in that sense are essential. Nation alone, could they do it? The US maybe yes. Europe certainly could not participate to a lunar program by themselves. But I think if we do it as a partnership, we can go do a lot more. We can leverage technologies, we can leverage talent in all these countries across the globe that can really push the partnership forward.
So looking ahead to future Artemis missions, we're going to have ESA astronauts on board those. Have you guys begun preparing